Hello and welcome to this presentation. I'm going to be talking about the paper called Towards the Design of a PABC-based Digital ID in Denmark, Usefulness, Barriers and Recommendations. My name is Mads Schaarup Andersen and I'm the author of this paper, and I work at the Alexandria Instituttet in Denmark. So why did we do this work? Well, the technology of privacy attributes-based credentials, they've been around for a while. We participated in a project called ABC for Trust here at the Alexandria Instituttet, and a project which finished I think it was 6 or 7 years ago. So back then these technologies already existed, and we're still working with it in the Olympus project, which of which this paper is part of, and so we found that these technologies, they have a lot of advantages. They've been around for a while. However, we don't really see them in commercial products yet. So why might that be, you might want to ask, and that's really what our starting point for doing this research. So what we really wanted to examine was, well, what is the potential for these PABC-based technologies amongst users and service providers? And I want to emphasize that we had our main focus on the users in this paper. And thinking that, you know, this technology is actually useful, like how do we design for PABC-based digital IDs and digital IDs in general? So this is what we wanted to examine. Our main part of this work was to do an interview study, and we did it with 11 participants. We did it in the context of Denmark because we wanted to have like some sort of uniformity in terms of culture among the participants. So they were all Danish residents. We recruited them all to have to be above 18 years of age, and the people that we got were 20 to 67 years old, and there was like an even distribution amongst males and females. We also wanted to get a broad representation in terms of education and where they live in Denmark. And our method was like in-depth, semi-structured interviews, so we could explore the interesting part or like the participants' view that came up during the interview. During this project, we also did some very informal interviews with project partners and some unstructured interviews with 3 supermarket representatives to get more of an idea of, like the service provider side of it, as I mentioned before. But in this presentation, I'll focus on the user side of it. So the interview guide that we used for interviewing these participants was that we wanted some like demographic information. Then we wanted to talk to them about like how they perceived online security and sharing of personal information, and whether or not they took like any precautions when using stuff online and sharing their personal information. We also wanted to talk to them a little bit about like physical IDs and this idea of switching from a physical ID to a virtual. And we wanted to talk to them about their perception of misuse and identity theft. And then we wanted to present a design of an Olympus, which is a privacy attributes-based credential-based ID that we did in-house. So originally we designed this interview to be like a physical interview where we had our design printed that they could then like look at and comment on and go through. However, due to COVID-19 restrictions, we were limited to doing this as an online interview. So instead of having this physical thing that we could show them, we divided it into chunks and showed it to them during the interviews and got some feedback there. So this is what we showed them. The idea of the scenario is that we got this young guy here who's called Jens, and his parents are throwing a party, so they sent him down to the supermarket to buy a bottle of gin for their welcome drink. So Jens just turned 18. He knows he's a little bit young looking, so he needs to be able to prove to the people at the supermarket that he is actually like 18, which is a legal limit to buy liquor in Denmark. And the reason that we chose this scenario was that this is something that most people will be familiar with, either because it's something that they still actively have to do, you know, like show their ID to be able to buy liquor, or it will be something that people will have had to do at some point in their lives so they can relate to it. So Jens here, he has to, you know, go to the App Store, download the app. Then he needs to choose, well, where is he going? So which store does he need to use this on? He chooses Co-op, which is a Danish supermarket chain. And he chooses that he needs to buy liquor and tobacco, and to do this, he needs to show a photo, and it needs to use his birthday. And then he gets a message, well, now you can use the app in the Co-op. So to give him a real representation of how this might look, we did these images, and Jens, he goes down to the supermarket, you know, he has a bottle of liquor here. As expected, the cashier then asks him for, you know, ID, can you prove you're over 18? So Jens takes out his cell phone, he opens up the app, chooses the store that he's in, and that he needs to verify his age. Then he gets this screen, which is a picture of himself coupled with a QR code. And this is what he needs to show to the cashier. And the cashier has like some sort of verification device here. For like testing purposes, this would probably be like a device such as a phone, not her personal phone, but you know, like a phone tied to this specific register. She would then take that up, scan the QR code, and so this is Jens's phone, and the cashier's phone would then show this, a picture of Jens, so she could like look up and verify that he's not just bringing somebody else's phone and their identity. And she will then get the message that this customer is over the age of 18, but nothing more. Jens can now pay for the bottle and go home, and he has made a successful purchase. So what did we find out in these interviews? And I'm going to go through some general findings and some related a little bit more to the design that we presented. So the most important thing that we found is that trust is really a main factor in feeling secure. And with the participants that we interviewed, we found that, well, if the state builds or vouches for this system, the participants will trust it. Some participants had like an equal level of trust in like large private companies and state. However, nobody trusted private companies or NGOs more than the state. So in general, the state in Denmark is very trusted, and there's a lot of research that shows why this might be the case. So this was not unexpected. But this also talks a little bit about, you know, maybe this high degree of trust in public authorities might mean why our Danish participants said what they this. We also found that if the participants trust the organization behind the solution, there's really no need to explain the technology in detail. And PABCs are quite complex, and there's a lot of advanced crypto behind it. So this is a good result in the sense that, you know, it's not that important to try to figure out how to explain this. We also found that our participants really trusted the Danish national electronic ID called NemID. So just to show how, like, what the participants said when they, you know, trusted the state more, one of them said the state has to test it many times and will be held accountable if there are errors in the system versus private companies. It's a different reality. So they really thought that you know, the state would be under more scrutiny than a private company. Also found that for a lot of the participants, physical IDs were considered safe enough. So one of them said that there's no information on it that would be able to be misused for anything. And this was this particular participant's mental model, and that might not necessarily be true, but at least this is how they perceived it. And even the participants who knew that there was, like for example, like the Danish Social Security number on their driver's license, they still didn't really perceive much of a threat when they used it to pick up a package or verify their IDs. When talking about this idea that we presented and having an app to have your IDs in, we found that having everything in one place was seen as both a good and a bad thing. So some sort of like paradoxical thing in this, because somebody said, well, sometimes the same participant expressed that it was really good that they only needed one app, but they were also afraid that they were then going to lose everything if they lost this app. However, some of the participants also expressed that there was actually a difference between losing a wallet and a phone in terms of security, because if you use your wallet, then you lose everything. But if you have your phone stolen, it's really not that easy to gain information to it, access to it, because there are all sorts of passwords, face IDs, and fingerprints as security measures. Whereas, like if you have like physical cards, you could just read all the information as soon as you got a hold of it. Also found that age really seemed to be a factor in relation to whether or not it was perceived useful or not to have digital IDs. And a lot of it came down to whether or not it's, you always carry your wallet when you go out or not. Somebody said, well, without having to bring everything. For example, during the summer, then I don't wear a giant jacket where I can have stuff in the pocket. And we really found that to be a tendency that, like, the older the participants were, the more they always carried their wallets and sometimes a phone, whereas the younger they were, they always carried a phone and sometimes a wallet. We also found that even though some people didn't, consider the information to be all that ready for misuse, we found that some participants were more worried than others, and in particular young women expressed the need to hide some attributes once in a while, and that really shows that we do need to consider these edge cases. Several participants also mentioned that celebrities have had their data misused. So in terms of specific design, we found that time is a factor. Some parts of our design was laborious, it needs to be fast or else they won't use it. We found that a wide adaptation would be needed. You had to be able to use this everywhere. But they found in general that a good idea to limit the information, but also that security guarantees can be hard to understand. So the design guidelines that we came up with was that the public authority should run about the system. Explanations of security guarantees should not be present in the primary layer. They should be and feel fast to use. We should design for edge cases. The identity solution should be widely usable. The solution should support many IDs. There should be a focus on helping the verifiers. That's based on the interviews with the service providers. You can read more about that in the paper. And we should prioritize giving public information rather than like having a lot of information about the technology in the app, because people are gonna make the decision of whether or not to use the technology before they install it. So we found that in implementing PABC-based IDs, there's no direct pull from users and citizens for this type of technology at the moment. And PABC technology has a lot of merits and should still be implemented. So in conclusion, users find it useful to have all IDs in one place. They're not really asking for technology, but they still find the guarantees it provides useful. PABC-based solutions should be controlled by or approved by a public authority. Trust in the provider is more important than understanding the technology. And we should design using these 8 guidelines that we came up with. So thank you for your time, and you can always follow me on Twitter if you're interested in what we do. Thank you.